Allow me to immediately state that I have bias. As someone whose first foray into this franchise was Persona 3 Portable back in 2012, Persona 3 means a lot to me. Even more than it did before, as I've since accumulated real-life apathy syndrome, which is just as much fun to live through as it looks in the game. That aside, though, I loved Portable when I played it, and I continued to love it when I replayed it like 4 more times immediately after hitting credits. But with each of those replays, I only played as Kotane, the female protagonist that was exclusive to Portable. The only time I played as Makoto, the male protagonist, was the single time I played through FES, which I had later bought on the PlayStation Store, along with games like Rido, Nocturne, and Digital Devil Saga. However, since FES did not have a lot of the conveniences and quality of life things that I enjoyed in Portable, like skip travel, skill cards, and, the ability to actually control your party, I did not like my playthrough of FES. I didn't even finish the answer when I finally got to it. So, for years, I was of the belief that even without the answer, P3P was the only version of the game you should bother with. Yes, you miss out on physically running to and fro to each location during the day, but the game made up for that in my opinion with the vastly superior social links headed by Azusa Kido, and overall just being more satisfying to play than FES in general. So, when rumors started going around that Persona 3 might be getting a remake, I was against it, honestly. I didn't think Persona 3 needed a remake in the first place. I'd rather Persona 1 get a remake, or heck, even SMT if. But the news came out last year that the rumor was indeed true, and moreover, Persona 3 Reload was not going to have the answer or the choice to play as Kotane. Much like Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, we were going with the base game and just sprinkling on aspects from the re-releases. Hey, so that was written before Atlus announced the answer as DLC coming in September? How foolish of me to expect a modern video game to wait longer than a month to announce that they want you to spend more money on it. I have no clue how to feel about how soon that's coming out. It makes me wonder why the game didn't get pushed back a few months if the answer was already so far along in development that they could have just shown it off like they did. But it is what it is, I suppose. Anyway, back to the video. I was not going to play this game. If it wasn't even going to be a complete remake, then I didn't really see the point. Especially since Portable HD was only out a few months before they made that announcement. But as the day of release grew closer, I knew if I just acted like a Scrooge about Reload and went around saying, I can't be a lesbian in Reload, so the game is dead to me, then I wouldn't really be having a conversation about the game. I would be whining. So, as somebody who doesn't like to just write off something potentially good because of silly personal gripes, I decided to dive headfirst into this revision of an old classic. And now I want to gab incoherently about it for, far too long, so you could put this on in the background while you're folding laundry or trying to fall asleep or running through Tartarus, I guess. FYI, I played this via Xbox PC Game Pass, as Discord gave me 3 free months of it, and I'd be a monkey's uncle if you think I'm gonna pay $70 for this game after I bought Portable HD last year. But I can say it's a very good version of the game to play, and if you also have some free months lying around, I say go for it. I also just want to point out we will have a spoiler section in the video, and I will give anyone who doesn't want to know any spoilers quite yet a heads up before we get into that section. And just as a form of consideration, I'd appreciate if anyone that wants to comment on the spoilers and such will put a spoiler warning in their comments so that people who haven't blitzed through the game yet don't get slapped in the face with forbidden knowledge. Sounds good? Alright, I think we can get started then.
And now, our feature presentation.
Starting off with what else but the intro, I think Full Moon Full Life as a song is very well done. Another great song to add to Persona 3's lineage. I especially enjoyed the melodic callbacks to Burn My Dread, acting almost like musical cameos to the original song. But the main thing that nags me about this intro is that it feels standard. Don't get me wrong, it's animated well, and there's some shots that genuinely give me goosebumps, but it also kind of lacks substance. It's very surface level is what I'm trying to get at. Previous intros for Persona 3 were caked in mystery and abstract imagery, but this one just kind of spells it all out. That's not exactly a bad thing, mind you, like FES's opening has no mystery or abstract imagery either, it's just bombastic music and cool stuff flashing on screen to get you hyped to play the game. But, I don't know, there's something that's just missing to Reload's opening, something preventing me from liking it as much as P3 or Portable's openings. Oh. There's no piano piece. Dang. I really like that one. Oh well. Here's another nitpick that happens early on. So, a lot of us know how this game starts. Makoto walking the streets on his way to Iwatodai's dorm, intercutting with Yukari in a room, Sync running full tilt as she picks a gun up from off the ground. The sounds of the running water and the hustle and bustle of the city thrown at you back to back with jarring cuts that form a cacophony, reaching its pinnacle as the music Makoto is listening to grows in volume, and we're given the striking visual of Yukari putting the gun to her head. The tension grows and anxiety builds as the concerning thought of, am I really about to watch this high school girl blow her brains out in the first 3 minutes, starts to eclipse any other thought you could be having, and then her hand goes limp, hanging onto the gun for just a moment before it crashes to the ground. Her sobs and the booming soundtrack, the only sounds present until we transition to Makoto on the train. This is probably the most aggressive opener to a Persona game. It's one of the few things I'd say you're missing out on if you played Portable over FES. But the way they do this scene in Reload, with the music not growing in volume as Yukari struggles to pull the trigger, matched with the fact that Yukari puts the gun to her head and drops it so fast you barely get a chance to register it even happens, on top of the fact that Burn My Dread Last Battle is being relegated to a cameo more than something that is impacting the scene, I don't know, it just feels so flaccid. The flow of this opening's just all over the place, and having that be the first real thing you end up seeing, I felt anxiety creep its ugly head into my heart as I really started to worry about what they did to this game. Amusingly, we get a neat moment directly after it, where we get to run around the strip mall during the dark hour. This is a fine addition to the concept and lets the creepy imagery really show itself off, before we finally reach the Iwatodai dorm.
Welcome.
That's really good. I love things that do that camera trick. I guess since I won't have a better time to ask this, I'll go ahead and ask it now. Is this character, the one you play as, is he still Minato Arisato to you, or have you accepted Makoto Yuki as the new name for him? I liked the name Minato. It's more original as well, since we have like 4 Makotos in the franchise now, but I tend to just stick with whatever is their official name at the time. That's also why I've been calling Femc Kotane in this video, even though for years I've known her as Hamuko or Minako. I'm just weird about that kind of thing, I'm sorry. That being said, Akira Kurisu is just a cooler sounding name than Ren Amamiya, but it's fine. I've grown used to that one as well. Anyhow, the game continues on pretty well without a hitch, barring this very cheap-looking moment with the train. Like, what's going on here? How are the PS2 cutscenes doing better than this 2024 video game? But you have your first day of school, and I have to admit, Gekkoukan looks amazing. The way students are walking through the halls, the little interactions you can glean from how they're positioned, the chatter as you run by, it's all pretty well done stuff. It's also amusing to remember this game is set in 2009, which means everyone's got flip phones, yeah! Oddly, as the opening days continued to play out, I started to feel that things were moving too fast. Like, we weren't giving some of these moments enough time to really breathe. But then I realized, I feel that way because Portable waited until you were in Tartarus before a Velvet attendant even showed up, but Here, Elizabeth shows up the first time you meet Igor. So that little extra time where it was just Igor explaining to you your role with the spotlight solely on him, allowing the surreal, otherworldly nature of the Velvet Room itself to settle in. I don't know, I feel like we could have carried that over. I get that it was only done in Portable because there were 2 Velvet attendants you could choose from, and in FES, Elizabeth was there in the first meeting, but since the first time you show up here in Reload isn't an animated cutscene anymore, I feel like you could have taken the opportunity to build up more to that introduction. It would have been a small thing for sure, but those small things tend to add up to the big picture. Also, it's funny how for years the discourse regarding FES versus Portable was that in FES you'd be getting the full-on 2D animated cutscenes for important moments, but in Portable you got models acting out the cutscenes or screen caps of those cutscenes acting as game CGs. And now we have a mix of both, with a lot of the animated cutscenes getting replaced by in-game ones. Which, I get it, one's way cheaper than the other, but at the same time, it starts to impact things a bit, like with Makoto's Persona Awakening. Overall, I think the scene is done fine in Reload, but the animation here is kind of jank at times, like the moment where Thanatos bursts out of Orpheus. Obviously, its original 2D animated version still reigns supreme. The harsh shadows and colors depicting Makoto like a sadistic spider, taking the time to revel in the suffering it's about to unleash onto the fly that enter its domain, only for it being twice as horrific, twice as malicious to be released from deep within the psyche of Makoto and brutalize this pathetic shadow, roaring triumphantly into the night before turning back to Orpheus as quick as a camera glitch. Like we were observing exactly what Akihiko, Mitsuru, and Akutsuki bared witness to. I'll even give Portable points over Reload because it's still able to convey the brutality and ferocious nature of this unchained harbinger of the abyss who takes glee in squeezing the life out of its victim like Raiden slurping up spinal fluid. The limitations of the PSP are apparent, plain as day. But with those limitations, maybe even in spite of them, the intensity of the scene never feels like it was compromised in the process of transition. But for Reload, there's no real impact to Thanatos here. He feels like a marionette on strings, and I'm sorry, but Thanatos is still to this day my favorite Persona design, so forgive me if I'm a little bit critical on how they showcase my Dino Skull murder child who I love dearly. It's the coffins. It's the cape of coffins that are chained together and shackled to him. I love coffins just being part of a design. When the Necromancers in Etrian Odyssey 5 were shown to just carry around coffins, I legit made a whole team that was just Necromancers. It's the silliest thing, but it's also really cool, so I love it. You know another thing I love? Akihiko's voice.
Hey there.
The new voices for the C's group are pretty good in general. The original voice cast is iconic, but I do like that they're not exactly trying to mimic the original cast. They're giving off the same energy that each character had going for them and taking it into a direction unique to their performance. Really good stuff. That being said, when we made it to the first Tartarus night, I realized something was very, very off.
Labyrinth? What are you talking about? What happened to our school?
Labyrinth? What are you talking about? What happened to our school?
The portraits. They're so subdued. They completely lack the expressive nature that P3 had going for it. It's like they were so afraid of having the characters go off model, probably because they made all the portraits to be like P5 with animated lip flaps in addition to blinking, so it's just easier to work around when the portrait barely has to change. But hey, maybe you disagree, and maybe you don't care about that at all. How about the things that actually matter when it comes to a game? The gameplay. Well, the fatigue system is completely removed. Listen, in FES, it was too harsh. The fact that you could get tired after like 5 battles in Tartarus was ridiculous. I like it much better in Portable, where you only get tired after you leave Tartarus, because then it's more likely that you used up all your SP, and needed to go rest to recuperate naturally. Of course, that wasn't the only way of getting tired. Full moon bosses and studying too late multiple days in a row would do this as well, but I really don't think this system was game ruining like I've seen others say over the years. You could solve it by napping in class, freshening up in the bathroom, or just going to bed early. Plus, Portable added Yawn Be Gone, which besides being an amazing name, was also a way to look out for your teammates and keep their health up as well, which was wholesome. I loved that. Not only that, but having the great status was rad, because it gave you a higher crit rate and accuracy, rewarding you in battle for taking care of yourself. But instead of having that little extra bit of role-playing, in this role-playing video game, they just took out the mechanic entirely, which I'm not a fan of. If you feel something needs to be improved, then improve upon it. We did it with party members, infusing, and neither of these improvements took anything out. I mean, tactics are even still in the game. They're an option for you to use. I just think the fatigue system didn't have to go the way of the dodo, especially when you're remaking the only game it shows up in. Now, some of you might say, hey, Persona 4 and 5 managed just fine without this fatigue system. In fact, they practically replaced it by shining a bigger emphasis on SP. So even if Reload losing it takes away from its identity and makes all the mentions of characters saying you're tired or exhausted kind of funny, maybe it's for the best that they didn't bring it back. But the thing about that is, Reload hands you so many ways to recover SP so early on that you hit a point much quicker than those games where that stops being a concern if you're not just tossing SP away for the thrill of it. Not only that, they give you Baton Pass on the 6th floor of Tartarus, though in this game it's called Shift, and this kind of breaks the game in two, at least for everything pertaining to Tartarus. Full moon bosses aren't as susceptible to shifting, but there are a few exceptions. Normal enemies and floor bosses, though, these were not designed for you to be able to do this kind of thing, and they didn't buff the enemy at all to really compensate for that, which is kind of odd. Persona 3 was one of the harder Persona games, so it feels weird to not try and keep that alive in some way, especially from Atlus. Mr. We Get Off on Your Tears, Atlus. And before you ask, no, I didn't play on Merciless. I don't have an ego. I have a lack of self-esteem. There's a difference. I also don't feel like making it so I barely deal any damage and making the enemy have a bunch more health really adds a meaningful challenge at all. It just makes things tedious. I would like it if more RPGs took, like, the trial system that the Mary Skelter series has, where you can just add modifiers and restrictions to your dungeon crawling and get rewards for doing so. It wouldn't really work for other Persona games, but with the nature of Tartarus as this random dungeon you scale every visit, I think it would have been a nice addition. Tartarus has always been that kind of thing where you're either fine with it or you think it's the most boring, monotonous part of Persona 3. So the option to add a little spice to each run could have helped with that, but I digress. You know another thing I miss? Being able to equip Makoto with more than just the sword. That was like the one fun thing for me during my singular playthrough of FES. Not only did it add a lot more flexibility when determining your team lineups, but it was just fun to think of Makoto as really impressionable despite his stoic appearance, and whenever he saw someone doing cool stuff with their weapon, he'd be like Kiryu in Yakuza. Also on that note, why is Kendo not an option anymore? Or swimming for that matter? We can only do track. Why? That was like the most uninteresting of the three. And I later found out they removed the music and photography classes. It's just art now. I get it. In the grand scheme, they were just reskins of the same thing and functionally didn't have any big differences. But it was still nice to have the choice. If I wanted Makoto to internalize that practicing Kendo would have made him better at using his sword during Tartarus, I should be allowed to do that. Same goes that if I wanted Makoto to think, you know, I listen to music so much, maybe I should give composing a shot. Again, that should have been carried over. It's a role-playing game. Let me play the role. Please! I'm begging you! And some of you might say, well, Persona 5 didn't have any clubs or sports teams to join and it worked out just fine. Yeah, because you were a felon in that game. Nobody wants to be in a club with a guy who's got a criminal record. So it was around this point in my playthrough when I decided to shift gears. As my audience is probably aware by now, I'm not too keen on being a negative Nancy. I don't try to seek problems where there aren't any, mainly because that's just not who I am. Plus, as somebody with the delectable mental health cocktail that is depression and anxiety, that sounds exhausting. So from this point on, I decided to just try and enjoy the game for what it is instead of hanging on to what I want it to be. And to that end, once I stopped expecting the game to be much of a challenge and just went along with the roller coaster ride it wanted to take me on, I found the game pretty exhilarating. Running full bore through the halls of Tartarus, slashing at unsuspecting shadows, dismantling them in only one turn and looking stylish as all get out as we did so, could be a lot of fun. And the return of my beloved skill cards means that my Frost-only run can go off without a hitch. Yeah, I tend to do Frost-only runs in these games for fun sometimes. This means I can only use Jack Frost and his variations, so in a game like Nocturne, the only demons I can have with me are Jack Frost and Black Frost since they're the only ones in that game. But for something like SMT4, I can use ones like King Frost, Frost Ace, and Demonijo. Obviously, I can still get demons or personas and use them for fusion purposes, but I can't actually use them in battle. And the time before I'm even able to make a Jack Frost is free game. I can play the game completely normal until I'm able to fuse myself with Snowman. I don't even remember when I started doing this. All I do know is that I love doing it. And this game was no exception. My Jack Frost was pretty much the Avatar. Had one of every element ready at all times. My only weaknesses for half the game were fire and stray insta-kill spells. But once I was able to fuse my little snowman into Black Frost for the rest of the game, I didn't have to worry about a thing. But speaking of fusion real quick, and this is a minor thing, but I kinda wish the reverse compendium fusion got carried over from SMT5. It's so amazing to just search through the possible fusions you can do, see what you're missing, and then be able to use the demons you're carrying and the compendium at that moment to pick something and go for it. Fusion search on its own works just fine in this game, don't get me wrong. I just would have liked that little extra bit of convenience SMT5 introduced. Going back to Tartarus, though, wow. You know, like, wow. I like the change of perspective. The top-down camera view that was a holdover from its beta phase, where the transition from P1 and P2's isometric view into a 3D space was still being worked out, made sense for the time, but it's clear that for a game like this, it's probably best to stick to a more third-person and grounded camera view, especially since it makes the architecture for Tartarus more imposing and imitating than it ever had been before. It's easily the best change in regards to the dungeon crawling aspect of the game. And I've ignored the elephant in the room for long enough now. The new version of Mass Destruction is okay. I got used to Azumi Takahashi's take on this song, but I still think it's just okay. That being said, I don't really like the replacement for A Deep Mentality. Azumi cannot hit those notes nearly as hard as Yumi Kawamura could in her heyday. I get that Yumi couldn't come back because her years of smoking caught up with her, but I don't know, maybe I just need more time to appreciate it, separately from what came before her, you know? Because when Azumi gets new songs like Color Your Night, the new nighttime theme, she's amazing, and I love this new battle theme. It's going down now. It kind of overshadows Mass Destruction because it happens whenever you get an advantage over the enemy, something that they've made very easy to pull off and make it even easier as you progress through the game. So like 90% of the game I was hearing it's going down now, which was just really funny. While we're on the topic of music, this is basically the first main series game without Shoji Meguro at the helm after his departure from Atlus a few years ago. However, the fact that Atsushi Kitajo is his replacement, at least for this game, made perfect sense to me. I first heard this dude's work with Persona Q's soundtrack, and his original compositions matched with his renditions of tracks that originate from P3 and P4 showed me he had an amazing grip on matching the aesthetic of those games while not coming off as a carbon copy. So hearing how he tackles Reload soundtrack was a treat for the ears. So many classic tracks and songs given a new breath of life just made me all giddy as I played. Sadly, I cannot play any of it for you because Atlus will come here and take everything I own if I do, but you should be able to find people who have uploaded the soundtrack on YouTube. Of course, I can't bring up this game's soundtrack without bringing up the man, the myth, the legend, Lotus Juice, who completely kills it in this game. He does the dorm rap now, and it's just as fun and goofy. I love it so much. But more than that, they actually allowed him to sing in this one. It's not just rapping all the time. And that brought a huge smile to my face. I've been listening to his personal work since 2016, and a lot of the different vocal ranges he tried out on his albums over the years pops up here in this game, and it's just amazing to hear how far the dude's come in almost 2 decades. Oh my goodness, this game is almost 20 years old. Whew, anyways. After the first real full moon boss, you get introduced to a new thing in this game, linked episodes. These for the most part operate as a consolation because Makoto doesn't have social links with the guys and C's, only the girls, so we get time to actually give the male cast more of a spotlight outside of the main story, which I very much appreciate. There's also activities that everyone in C's can get involved with. They result in an item for you or another point in your social stats, but overall are just cute interactions. There's another thing that activities do, but to get into that, we need to get into another new thing to this game, Theurgy. This effectively replaces the fusion skills that FES and Portable had and expands upon it. Whenever you do something in battle that appeals to the characteristics of the individual, you raise their Theurgy gauge, and once it's maxed out, you can perform a special attack. Oftentimes, it's a severe elemental attack that ignores resistances, but there's ones that heal, revive, buff, and so on. Even though this effectively trivializes every important fight from this point on, I don't really mind because I love the idea so much. The various personalities of the people that aid you in your fool's journey has been the main focus of these games starting with 3. So having your party members' personalities actually factor into the gameplay and make being in character as you play them a rewarding experience, I think is pretty cool, and I would love to see this continue in future games. How this ties back to activities is that after doing an activity 3 times, you cause a characteristic to appear on the character you did that activity with. These are passive buffs that tie into the character's playstyle, which in turn make increasing your Theurgy gauge easier. Another thing that's made easier is shuffle time, which the fact that we even still call it that in this game is amusing to me, because you don't even shuffle the cards anymore. There's no card minigames at all actually, you just pick them. Either way, it's not nearly as broken as it was in, say, P4G. You can't max out stats to get a persona to level 99 in the first area. Instead, Major Arcana cards can only be used once per Tartarus trip. You gradually get these Major Arcana cards by progressing the game, and collecting enough will temporarily upgrade the wand cards by 1 level during that Tartarus trip as well. This is a pretty satisfying change, all things considered. And while there's no penalty cards anymore, I guess they just wanted shuffle time to feel more rewarding? I'm not quite sure. But something I am sure about is that Elizabeth's requests are much quicker now. There's no longer specific days you have to wait to get the item she requests. No, it could be done in the same day. Like, literally within the minute of you getting a request, you can go get what you need and finish it in a snap. And it's through these, as well as just finding them on the ground or advancing social links, that you can get a new little doohickey, Twilight Fragments. These are used to unlock specially marked chests, and are your new means of using the clock in the main hall of Tartarus to heal. In Portable, this clock required a sizable amount of money, and in FES, you just got healed whenever you went back to the main hall as long as you weren't tired. But that's not the only clock in town, because starting in the 3rd block onwards, you have the Great Clock Room, which can randomly appear whenever you open one of those locked chests. This lets you pick 2 party members who are falling behind in levels and pump them full of experience that'll cash in all at once the next time they enter a battle. This is a welcome change, because before, if you had party members that were falling behind, you either had to babysit them while trying to get their levels up, or you just let them alone for the rest of the playthrough. So having a means to let the rest of your party function just as well as your main team is appreciated. And you know what else has a function? The computer in the dorm. Now you can use software that either improves social stats, gives you a variety of upgrades, or lets you know about some secrets you can take advantage of in your day-to-day life. You can get more software from the net cafe at the strip mall, and not only that, you can get dark web URLs from a shady man at Club Escapade, which is hilarious. Did the public at large even know about the dark web in 2009? Whatever, it's fine, and I can't exactly complain about getting to date Fuka sooner rather than later. Actually, on that note, let's talk about social links. Social links in this game were interesting to go through, since quite frankly, I barely remembered anything from Makoto's side, besides the fact that I can't be friends with half of the C's group. So I was effectively going through these for the first time all over again, and yeah, Kotene's social links are just better, just in general, but I had to give P3 the mulligan on this one because it was their first attempt at doing social links, so it's not really fair to compare it to a game that came out after P3 and P4. Some might argue that they should have revised a lot of the social links since they're trying to improve so many other things as is, but that can get into kind of dubious territory, so I think it's fine that they kept some social links bad just to showcase newcomers how much things have improved in the series. And since I'm mentioning it so much, let's talk about some of those improvements. One change that was done is that instead of your friends at school walking up to you at lunchtime to see if you're free, we've carried over the messaging from P5 and have it so that social links just text you now. God forbid the phone bill Makoto racked up during this whole game, but it's nice to be able to check via those messages if you're going to advance in that rank or not. Plus, it's very cute to see all the new dialogue that these characters send your way, like the elderly couple trying to work out these newfangled phones, Tanaka baiting you with spam tier subject titles, and the online video game? Maya can text you directly from the game? What kind of Final Fantasy XIV companion app are you running on that flip phone, Makoto? On that note, though, I love that Maya's portrait is like a facsimile of the heroine from SMT1, but they're playing Innocent Sin online. It's really silly, while also just insanely charming. I love that even now Persona gives little nods to SMT games, regardless if people nowadays are gonna get them. What really took me by surprise is that, barring Maya, technically, the social links are voiced in full. I thought we were just going to get the first and last event voiced like in P5, but here Kenji is, telling you about his straight Shota fantasies, and he still talks. Like, wow, okay. Unexpected. Extra moments like you hanging out on the weekends aren't voiced still, but the whole social link still is, which is kinda wild. Something else that's kinda wild is the new rewind feature. It makes up to 5 snapshots in time, whether it's day or evening, and allows you to go back to them if you realized you missed a deadline or you picked a bad social link response, what have you. With this, now anyone that worries about getting everything done in one playthrough has nothing to fear. That's a call out to one friend in particular, he knows who he is. But yeah, basically every single social link is voiced, even the forgettable ones, or him.
Gourmet King 2009. Or was it 2010?
Here's the funny thing about Nozomi. I think the only reason I don't despise him in this game is because his voice actor adds such a charm to this character that, for me, did not exist before. I remember Nozomi being one of the worst social links in the series. He was selfish and egotistical and didn't care if he put you in danger to save his own skin. As a result, I envisioned the most smarmy, snot-nosed, arrogant voice imaginable because I felt it fit the character. And I just need to stress, he's still all of that. They didn't change his character or anything, but because he sounds like a Danganronpa character now, he no longer comes off as some irredeemable ball and chain you feel forced to be friends with. Instead, he's like Chowder from Monster House.
Well, Dad, why don't you kiss my hairy butt? Hey, DJ, got any beer?
Where he wants to come off as important or interesting, but he's just a goofy loser that borders on endearing.
Everything's good and normal over here. Except for my weight, that is.
Like, am I crazy? The man nearly loses a battle with his bowels at a seafood restaurant, and I don't dislike it. Now, there is something that makes me dislike the social link still, but I'll wait till the spoiler section to get into that. But yeah, I feel like the voice acting for this character made his social link bearable in a way. And everyone else's aren't half bad either. Hidetoshi has that stern and authoritative voice you'd expect from someone like him. The elderly couple have that kind of warm, inviting feeling that makes them pleasant to be around. And Bebe, oh my goodness, Bebe, he probably has the best voice actor in this game. My man is doing a French accent while throwing in Japanese words, and he'll say some words perfectly fluidly.
I love the culture of Nihon. Japan is sugoi. Amazing.
But other words, his accent will get in the way, and he'll have a pronunciation that's so off-kilter.
Could we go to the tea shop, Azuki Arai, together?
He's the perfect voice for the guy, even better than I ever envisioned for him. Yuko also stood out to me because her voice actress doesn't even sound like she's acting. She just sounds like she became the character.
Where's my towel? Can you wash this for me? I'm not their mother, you know. At least I don't have to worry about gaining weight since I'm always running around taking care of them.
If I didn't already know who I was going to date going into the game, I probably would have considered her. Thankfully, much like how Kotane could with the men in her route, Makoto can finally be in a platonic friendship with the women in his life, without fear of reversing a social link too. Which is good, because I am completely loyal to one girl in this game, Fuka, who I will admit has a better voice actress than the original. The original voice for Fuka sounded like she was sleeping through this script, but this Fuka is a lot more adorable and plays the role of being a shy, meek girl much better than the borderline monotone of the OG. I'm being a bit mean, I'm sorry. The original voice actress is still fine for the time, she's not bad or anything. She was just one of the few from C's that was noticeably different. Another one was Aigis, and this is a change that's interesting. Not due to the quality of the voice acting, mind you, more for the direction chosen. I understand that OG Aigis sounding like Robot Jones is probably off-putting to people nowadays.
I am Aigis. My mission is to destroy shadows. I have been assigned to C's, effective immediately.
But her stilted cadence made her eventual progression in the story hit a lot harder. The new Aigis sounds a bit too natural at the start.
I am Aigis. My objective is to exterminate shadows. I have been assigned to C's, effective immediately.
And while her change does still happen, it's less that her cadence changes at all, and it's more that she just changes her tone more often. That, and of course her manner of speech changes from being more technical and overly formal to being more casual. But that's the case for both, since Reload basically uses the same script as Portable, just touched up in places. As well as some other things we'll get into in the spoiler section, which I think we should be getting around to. But first, here's a few miscellaneous things I wanted to mention but couldn't find a way to put them in the script naturally. I like that when you stop at the police station now, Officer Kurosawa takes you into the back, because maybe buying stuff at the front desk was a little silly. There's little speech bubbles over characters that indicate whether they have new things to say or not, which is nice. Especially for NPCs, so I could get gems like my man here who's down to smooch a cute ghost girl as long as she doesn't devour his soul. The strip mall is now open 24 hours, which is pretty neato. The exam music actually plays during the transition to the next day, which is good. The stopping and starting thing was kinda silly. People can get stuck in Tartarus like Portable, and now even animals will be stuck and give you extra Twilight fragments if you go to save them. In Block 3, Monad doors are introduced. These are challenge rooms against stronger shadows that net you gems and other goodies, and these are fine. They're just stronger, regular enemies and operate as optional detours you can take. The real big boys await you in the Monad Passage, that waits near the end of each block from here onwards. These are multiple fights that are designed around a specific gimmick, like one fight will keep trying to charm you, another will have 4 samurai dudes that all have different elemental weaknesses and strengths, stuff like that. You'll get things like weapons and costumes after each fight, as well as some lore. But once you reach the end, you'll find a chest that contains a major arcana card, and an extra slot to pick said card during shuffle time. The cards you acquire through this also unlock the next Monad Passage, and so on and so forth. These are nice additions, and the awards are also pretty snazzy. I guess something can also be said about this game actually keeping most of the costumes from the original games, especially after P5, which barely had any costumes besides the Anniversary DLC, which was quite noticeable. But you can't manually talk to your teammates in Tartarus now, which means no one reacts whenever I have them change costumes anymore. That kind of bums me out. I would love to hear how this Akihiko reacts to wearing a tux. Aside from that, though, the fact that new party members have a special scene the first time they use their persona in battle is really neat and makes sense for this kind of game. The fortune teller at Club Escapade can now be used to influence Tartarus in various ways. I only used this once because it was a request from Elizabeth, and then I completely forgot about it, but I'm sure it's fine. And finally, BBlueV got changed. Normally it's open at the start of the game and acts as another means to deal with being tired, but since fatigue doesn't exist anymore, it gets changed to a store where your party members can remember skills they've forgotten. I have no footage of this place because I did not use this once during my playthrough. You made me wait till July, constantly seeing the store shuttered up, wondering what on earth could this possibly be now that a whole mechanic is missing from the game, and the answer you give me is practically nothing? I guess you would use this if you accidentally overwrote a skill you meant to save, but you can rewind time at will now. And by July, any newcomer to this game would have clearly seen that your party members are getting upgraded versions of the skills they have all the time. I don't understand who this is for, but it's fine, I guess. And with that, that is the last thing I can bring up that isn't regarding spoilers. If you would like to skip to my final thoughts about the remake, you can use the chapter feature or go into the description to skip to that section manually. If you're on a computer, you can hold the control key and use the left or right arrow keys to jump between chapters, which was really fun to find out. But either way, I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, we are officially in the spoiler section now. You mean to tell me we get the URL to the revenge site that Strega uses, and it doesn't amount to anything but courage? We don't get any extra scenes with them carrying out their jobs? This was the prime opportunity to flesh them out more. Give us more insight into how these three interact amongst themselves. But nope, this doesn't do anything like that at all. It's just courage. Courage that, by the way, was completely useless to me, as it was maxed by the time this URL was available, which is a slight problem in itself. I really don't understand the timing at which some of these programs are made available. You get this part-time improvement program that makes it so you can earn more money from doing part-time jobs. But who's still doing part-time jobs in October? You're loaded with money by this point. And you probably have all but one social stat maxed out. Who's using this? However, I did appreciate the renewable dating program that basically acts like a shrine you can use during the night. You get it in November, which is a little late, but by this point I had done enough activities that I upgraded everyone's characteristics. Tanaka and Mutatsu's social links were all done, and I ate enough fish to finally be considered a genius, so quite frankly, I had nothing else to do at night. So having the means to ensure I'm actually going to make progress in my social links during the day was very nice. But back to Strega for a bit. I was genuinely giddy when I saw there were new cutscenes for Strega. More time to give to what is still to this day one of the most interesting concepts in this series: rogue persona users. That is something that we wanted to be fully utilized so much that when the second trailer for P5 was leaked from a Japanese Blu-ray disc for Dancing All Night, and we first caught a glimpse of Yusuke, there was a common belief, at least in the circle I was in, that Yusuke was a persona user trying to stop the Phantom Thieves. Of course, that didn't happen, and Yusuke went on to become one of the best party members in the series, but that is the kind of desperation a lot of people felt, to do the Strega idea so much better. So I thought, oh, thank you. If you won't let me be a lesbian, and the answer isn't in the game day one, at least you spent the time to give Strega more depth and intrigue. And initially, I was about to be very upset because all of Takaya's scenes were just amounting to, "Join us, Luke, and together we will rule the galaxy, yes!" But then we get this scene, right before the final full moon shadow, where we finally, after all these years, give Strega the simple, sympathetic aspect that Jin would rather die then forget the time he spent with Chidori and Takaya. Again, it is simple, but it makes what awaits them in the end all the more tragic. You could have done more with that. Make us feel more regarding this group. But as I said, we don't get more scenes of these guys in their job, off the job, or anything like that. We get lore, and that's fine. It's neat to find out why Takaya doesn't use an evoker, or what actually happens when a persona kills its user. But I want more. that's like the best complaint to hear, right? You've hinted at the fact that despite their nihilism, there's still that glimpse of humanity in there, and I just want to see that glimpse more. And some of you might say, oh, what do you mean there's a glimpse of humanity? I mean, Jin, sure, but Takaya is just as set in his ideals that he can't see Chidori and Jin as anything else than the means to reach his goal. He doesn't care about them. To which, I have two things to say about that. One, this line, if you take out Jin first in the fight against these two.
Jin, you are going to pay for that.
Which matched with the fact that we, as the player, now have the context that Jin confided in Takaya days before this. You cannot tell me that Takaya doesn't care as well. And two, when Chidori is taken by Seize, Takaya now shows concern, but he doesn't let that cloud his judgment. Much like Makoto, he's a leader, and he knows he has to play his cards right if Jin and him have any chance at rescuing her. He even goes on to make another meeting with you, in the middle of an incoming typhoon, mind you, to make sure she's even still alive and what her situation is before they break into the hospital and bust her out. Also, to add in the humanity glimpse thing, Takaya makes a joke in this game. Atlus gave this man a sense of humor.
My coat is invisible to fools. But of course I'm joking.
This guy, Revolver Jesus, makes a joke. So you can see, after being teased with stuff like that, I want even more. So I wish they could have done so. Strega is a tragedy. Well, Chidori less so. Her outcome is more bittersweet than tragic per se, but Jin and Takaya, while they put on a brave face, it's clear what they're doing. They're running away from the truth. Keep in mind, if they actually lived after the dark hour went away, they would be like Chidori, dazed and confused with only fleeting dreams of what they lived through left behind, but it wouldn't stop the suppressant side effects, and they would die randomly without any clue on why it was happening. That's what Jin and Takaya fear, more than anything. The fear of not being in control of their lives, of not being able to go out on their own terms. A fear of an unknown future. But instead of being like Chidori, who confronted that fear and despite how much it hurt and tore her up inside, would be rewarded with a new life and a fresh start, later living happily with the man that risked everything for her, Jin and Takaya become consumed by their fear, their unwillingness to go through the pain that the unknown would bring, and instead find themselves deluded by the false grandeur of the present, until an end is known. The definitive period to their lives is tangible and understood. And once that unknown is comprehended, they relish in it, welcome it with open arms, because they have nothing to fear anymore. Takaya effectively becomes another Ikutsuki. He becomes the very person that ruined his life. And in that bitterness, that hatred, he wants to bring as many people as possible down to his level. Whether just mortally wounding them for a job or radicalizing the whole town to make them susceptible to the fall, Takaya wants the world to be as miserable and as hopeless as he is. And in his final moments, he only wishes that Jin was there with him, to see that everything they went through, the pain and suffering of their upbringing, in their eyes, amounted to something good in the end. The dream, the vision that both cling to so desperately. And, since I brought mention to him, oh my goodness, Ikutsuki. I thought with all these extra scenes we were giving him that we were also going to get something better than the hokey crucifying heel turn at Tartarus that ends as quickly as it happens, but nope, it's still just as silly. But in hindsight, it's kind of impossible to do this scene better without rewriting the entire latter half of the game, so I guess that's not really Reload's fault, it's more 2006 era writing catching up to bite the game in the rear. However, with all that aside, October in general feels like a turning point for the game, because it feels like all the budget got put into these last few months. The scene with Shinji's death is so beautifully done. I was weeping in my chair as I watched it unfold, especially the bit with Koromaru. I don't even like dogs, and this made me sympathize with one. Yakutsuki's heel turn, while silly, was animated well too. It feels so weird to have the cutscenes in the beginning of the game feel off, but to have these done so well. And it's not even just cutscenes. When I was fighting Jin and Takaya, and Jin knocked down Ken, and I watched him baton pass to Takaya, who then followed up with an attack, my jaw practically hit bedrock. Like, oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! After 47 hours of playing, it felt like the game was actually doing something meaningful with the mechanics it introduced! This is what I wanted the entire game. Some pushback. Something to feel like I'm not just cheating by using the tools the game gives me. This and the resulting Hangman fight were the most challenging battles in the game for me, and I was over the gosh diddly dang moon when they happened. I wish stuff like this happened more. And since I mentioned Ken, allow me to point out that this game made Ken and Koromaru usable to me, because now they have light and dark skills that do damage. And yes, I did get rid of all the instant kill skills that Ken had the moment I could, because I don't like them. Moves that have low accuracy don't gel with me. You can blame all the competitive Pokemon I've tried out back in Gen 4. Blizzard? Thunder? No thank you. I'll take Ice Beam and Thunderbolt, please. Moving on. I mentioned earlier that I like Tartarus's visual upgrade on its own, but to dwell a little bit deeper into it as a whole, the first two blocks are kinda standard and plain, and that's fine. You're getting used to how this MC Escher Nightmarescape operates. Block 3 kinda kicks it up in the visual department and is pretty fun to run through, even though this preset room where the stairs fall into place would trip me up while I'm speeding down the halls. Block 4 is probably the weakest in this game. It's just really big, like real wide open stretches with these columns that shoot up towards the ceiling when you get close to them, and that's it. I think they knew they had nothing going with this place because this is where they tried to add in another mechanic, that of greedy shadows, which are giant golden shadows that swipe all the treasure on the floor, and then you have to chase them via a series of guessing left or right down hallways to which path the golden shadow took. It's entirely RNG, and if you pick the wrong directions, it gets away, but you still get a few treasures left over. That said, they managed to happen every single time I had to stop recording to prevent from running out of hard drive space. This is why the footage you are seeing is from Block 6, because it was the only time I was able to record it happening, and of course, at this point, Fuka just has the ability to see what path it takes, so the little guessing game is done with, and now you just get to whack a giant golden piñata. It's a fine addition, though. Block 5 is a treat for the eyes, though I'm sure for some people it hurts their eyes. I really liked how much harder they went with the groovy aesthetic of this place. Plus, all of the winding roads and curves makes it feel like you're drifting through an ongoing rainbow road. And in the end, Block 6 is tranquility. Like, I joked about Tartarus being like an MC Escher painting, but it really hits here. This area gives me the same calming, abstract nature as liminal spaces tend to, and much like liminal spaces, I feel like I can spend a long time here in a state of perpetual infinity that lasts as long as I'd like. But instead of indulging in that, we need to talk about the end of this game. So, after killing Ryoji to see the bad ending cutscene, which is really cute and wholesome if you ignore the whole they're all about to die thing, then saving him for real because I want to be told the Arcana is the means by which all is revealed, we roll over into January, and man, when the new version of Memories of the City kicked in, it hit me that I hadn't really heard that theme in context to this game in years. And it also made me realize I was absolutely going to cry before the end of this game, and then again when the actual ending happens, but we'll get to that. I like how muted the color palette gets in January. It's as if the world itself has gone dour, now with the knowledge that all life will end in just a month. But Makoto and the gang made their choice, and they're going to see it through to the end, no matter what. This is the first time I've done Aigis' social link on the male side, and to my surprise, not much changes. However, new to Reload is that Aigis texts you much like everyone else, and I love how much amusement she seems to find in the cat emoji, and she just keeps putting more and more into her texts. It's the little things, I tells you. This was also the first time I ever did Mitsuru's social link in full on the male side, and man, when her social link doesn't result in her protecting you like a younger sibling, it feels like a soap opera with her proclaiming her love for you in broad daylight, and also weird because Makoto and Fuka were dating at this point in my playthrough. And this incident continues into the next rank where Mitsuru reveals her true feelings and Makoto has to turn her down. And while her reaction to you wanting to stay friends after she confessed is hilarious.
I haven't eaten since this morning, so I'm terribly famished. I'd say you bear some responsibility for this. I could do with some takoyaki on our way back. Your treat? I'd hardly complain if you were to do at least that much to mend a broken heart.
It also makes me feel so bad. Like, this is a tangent in itself, but this whole video has been a series of tangents and rambling, so I don't think you mind exactly. I hope relationships mean a bit more in Persona 6, especially when you're dating someone on your team, because it does not make any sense that nobody even realizes that Makoto and Fuka were dating in my playthrough. The closest I saw was Junpei realizing that Makoto was out late on Christmas Eve, but that's it, and I bet he says that regardless of who you're dating. It's not hard to make a conditional branch that changes the dialogue accordingly, especially for instances like this when it's not even Hang on a second. Mitsuru, you have cameras in all of our rooms. You saw Makoto and Fuka. There's no way you did it, so that makes even less sense. I get that it's still there because they want to give you the option to date multiple girls, but there's no Valentine's Day because you beat Nick, so it's not like there's some extra scene where you get beat within an inch of your life for trying to have a harem with 7 girls. I don't know, just this one in particular comes off as a little awkward. It's fine though. So with 2 days before the end of everything is said to be approaching, and watching the scene of everyone having fun at the shrine, it really clicked with me how much they changed the camaraderie between the C's. Beforehand, it genuinely felt like everyone at C's viewed their partnership as no more intimate than co-workers. Mitsuru especially came off as rather uncaring and distant, and Akihiko would have never been down to beat up a whole game with you on a cold winter's night. Love this sequence, by the way. But now, the tea that Mitsuru serves Makoto as she checks to make sure he's not getting burnt out of all the things she's asking him to do, as well as her learning that she should be more open with people so she doesn't come off as hard to approach, Akihiko treats Makoto like a training partner and shares a heart-to-heart with him regarding his foster parents and Miki, Yukari and Makoto cooking and bonding over movies, Junpei learning the importance of hard work from planting vegetables, or the whole bit with Ken and the watermelon, and Koromaru and Ken don't want him to use the baseball bat on it because they could tell it meant a lot to him, the pancake party they have. I said earlier these moments were cute and that's all, but there's so much more than that. They're the means to show how much everyone has grown to care for each other. No more can it be thought that these characters merely put up with one another because they have no other choice, because now everyone here is everything they're all missing. A family. Though, you know, Akihiko still has his foster parents and such, but they don't count. I'm sure there's people that dislike this change and wish that everyone was kept as distant, as bitter as before, but I guess I like both for different reasons. For one, my goal is to earn their trust and affection. For the other, my goal is to keep it. I'm not sure if other people kind of do sappy things in games, but on the day of Nyx's descent, I took a look at all the knickknacks and souvenirs Makoto kept during his year here, and went downstairs expecting to talk to everyone there, but they were all out and about. Ken and Koromaru were at the shrine, Akihiko at the strip mall, Junpei at the bench she met Chidori, and Yukari and Mitsuru at Pelodia Mall. And after talking to all of them, even though it meant nothing, even though the gameplay benefits were long lost on me, I prayed at the shrine. Because it just seemed like something Makoto would do on that day. This was the point where I fought the Reaper. I was actually a little surprised to see he was still pretty tough, but then again, I fought him when I was level 80, so maybe that was a little too soon. And as a result of killing him, I tried fighting Elizabeth. Then I remembered I was in the middle of a Frost run, so I had Black Frost equipped, and Elizabeth's fight has rules against having personas that block, absorb, or repel elements, so...
I bring you Negitora.
Huh? Leader, say something, please!
Yeah, I didn't even last a turn. And since I was just shy of getting all the social links done, if I had 10 more days I would have had all of them, and I didn't feel like fusing up a team just to fight Elizabeth, I just went on ahead to beat the game. So the rematches with Jin and Takai were fine. Since you fight them separately, you can't have any more cool baton pass moments, but Jin's desperation injection and Takaya having a theurgy of his own were big highlights. All that was left, though, was Nyx, and the introduction was a neat change. The feathers from the surrounding pillars flowing up to materialize the Nyx avatar was a much cooler introduction than it just phasing into existence. That being said, I do kind of miss the swirling storm clouds previous battles had going for it, but a night of absolute stillness as the avatar of death itself has been born onto the world is also pretty metal in its own right. Also,
the moment man devoured the fruit of knowledge, he sealed his fate. Entrusting his future to the cards, he clings to a dim hope. Yes, the Arcana is the means by which all is revealed. Attaining one's dream requires a stern will and unfailing determination.
It was hilarious to me that I was reciting the entire speech, word for word, along with them, from memory. I'm telling you, I've played this game too many times. Which means I also notice how much they changed around Nyx Avatar's moveset. Now each phase involves skills that are reminiscent of the Full Moon bosses, alongside skills unique to itself, which is a splendid touch considering all those shadows in Ryoji are now back together. I think this is a fine touch-up to an insanely memorable fight. But of course, it's only one half of such a fight. The fall begins to occur as Nyx pulls a Majora's Mask and starts to pull the moon towards Earth, leading to the fruits of our social labor to come to fruition as Makoto gains the power to deal with such a threat. Also, when I was saying Maya technically isn't voiced...
Oh god, I'm freaking out here. But I know he's doing his best out there too.
Yeah, that's the technicality. With the power of everyone except Keisuke at Makoto's side, he floats towards the moon that's holding Nyx and enters it, only to find... Oh my goodness? Are we about to fight Sephiroth or something? Jesus Christ! This scene is going to be completely changed if we ever get Kotone in this game, but that aside, holy cow!
I will.
The new version of Burn My Dread Last Battle is a welcome one. I couldn't exactly hear the lyrics clearly enough with everything else that was going on, but I could tell that Lotus Juice's part was entirely different. Looking up the lyrics, they seem to be sung from Makoto's point of view instead of just describing the scene in general. Very, very interesting change, and yeah, I've got no complaints, no critiques, just elation over Atlus getting this part of the game down so right. Tartarus and the Dark Hour begin to disappear, never to return again. Until Persona 4 Arena, that is, but ignoring that. The battle Cease fought for so long has reached its end, with time marching on until graduation is nearly upon us. And it's here on the last playable day of the game that Makoto hears about how the people he shared this year with are looking towards the future, bettering themselves, understanding what they want out of life, having a mental breakdown that they fell in love with one of their students, or getting grilled by an angry dad. Listen, buddy, despite the game just glossing over it, I didn't forget about her saying you struck her, so you could take this "you care too" nonsense and tell it to someone who believes it. Also, the thing about Nozomi that I didn't like, this man gets a statue in his honor and a book deal, and he's leaving to tour the country, and he didn't even write to us or anything before leaving on his pilgrimage? Even Hayase wrote to us, a man I literally forgot existed until his portrait was on screen. Yeah, you know what? Get the thugs back in here. Slap him in his jowls. Kick him while he's down. Dump peanut butter in his ramen. And yes, I'm more upset about him forgetting all about Makoto than him scamming people with his cult, because at least with that, he was just desperate for something to fill the void in his life after the death of his brother. While his actions were gross, narratively it at least made sense as someone dealing with loss in an unhealthy way and realizing that in the end. Nozomi not even sticking around to say goodbye at the end just doesn't sit right with me. Like, cool, okay, glad that Makoto meant so much to you, clearly. I'm glad that you won't get a chance to give any final words before... So about that. Saying goodbye to Akinari's mother, which, like everything else, is voiced, this was the point where I started crying. She was the last person I had to talk to before going back to the dorm. I didn't really even intend for it to be that way, it just happened with how much I was dragged to and fro, and... Well, after she was done, I paused my recording, I put down the controller, I took out my phone, and I let everyone that I love and care about know how much they mean to me. I'm sure it felt weird. I'm sure it was random to receive such a heartfelt vulnerability so early in the day. I'm sure a few even thought this was a sign that I might do something drastic, but no. I merely took what was said to heart and acted on it immediately. Back in 2012, I didn't get this game. I thought it was cool. I thought it understood the struggles I was going through at that age, and in a way it did, but in other ways it was preparing me for a life that I was still just getting started. I had never lost a friend before. I was the annoying weirdo that every kid in my neighborhood hated. I didn't have friends to lose. I never lost a loved one or a family member because in my mind, everyone was around for 15 years already. What's 15 more? I have lost friends now. Both by falling out of touch and by things out of their control. I've lost a family member now. Dementia and quickly debilitating health left them as a shadow of their former self before they finally slipped away in their sleep. I was never able to tell these people how much they meant to me. I always just expected them to be around as a constant in my life. And it's only after they're gone that I realized I should have done more. But I can't. The time for that is long gone. There's no second chances for things like that. So, I wasn't going to lose the chance that I have now. There's something so cruel about playing this game knowing how it ends. Having all these people say they can't wait to see Makoto next semester when you're well aware that's not going to happen. But Makoto's final moments are one of sharing joy, hope, and optimism for the future. They're the exact things that Nyx wanted to destroy, and Makoto got to see nearly everyone he grew to like over this year, cherishing the gift of life in their own ways. It is with this and the final speech from Aigis as she too, an android that was designed to fight but became human in her own right, expressing her final understanding of what it means to be alive, that Makoto begins to pass on. Without any regrets, confident that even though he'll be gone, everyone else has shown that they'll be just fine. Needless to say, the Waterworks came back with a vengeance, especially when it came to the music in this ending scene. The melodic notes of Kimi no Kyoku easing into the theme before the song itself is given center stage. And you know what? Azumi Takahashi's version of Memories with You is pretty well done too. I was tearfully singing along and breaking down multiple times during it, so that has to mean something, yeah? Also, is this why there's like a water theme to the menus in this game? I thought it was just symbolic of sinking into depression. Like, I've seen artwork over the years that convey that kind of message, but was it just alluding to Makoto dying at the end here? Now I'm not really sure, but I do love that the title screen changes. That's a good payoff for the silence from earlier. Ultimately, while there's some flaws here and there, this is overall the best way to play Makoto's route. Yes, we've lost a handful of things that I would have liked to see all gussied up in HD, but if you spit in Wagyu, it's still a really good steak. I can safely say it wasn't a waste of time, but I still don't think it should cost $70, that's still way too much to me. And despite me enjoying myself overall, I don't think I'm ever going to play this version again. I could just say, oh, it doesn't have the answer or Kotane in her route, so it's not the definitive Persona 3, but it's a bit more than that. My favorite Megaton game is Devil Survivor 2. You know what Atlus did when they re-released that game on 3DS? They just gave you a whole other game with most of the same cast, an entire week dealing with a new threat in a world parallel to the original game, and that was amazing. When Etrian Odyssey 1 and 2 got remakes, besides changing up the dungeons, fixing all the classes so they actually function, and making all the enemies 3D models instead of sprites, they also just added in a story mode. They added optional plots to a series that has no story. And we're gonna put a big asterisk on that. If you're in the know, then you know why I said that. For everyone else, please play Etrian Odyssey if you like old school dungeon crawling RPGs. Those games are fantastic. Point is, Atlus has done way more in the past, which means I know they can do better than this. Chances are this was not something that was given as much time and attention as the big budget slobber knocker that Metaphor is shaping up to be, nor the inevitable Persona 6 that you know they had to be working on by now, which kinda depresses me. Again, this is not a bad version of Persona 3, please don't misunderstand that. For many, this is going to be their definitive version, and everything that's missing just doesn't matter. But the reason as to why this game is disappointing to me, again, ignoring the personal bias of, it's not my remake, nah, it's because I expect more out of a company that has routinely gone above and beyond for its player base. The linked episodes and Monad Doors are fine additions, but ultimately, the linked episodes don't replace having a full-on social link, and despite how much I love Thurgy, it's basically an I win button, so any challenge that the Monad Doors tries to add kinda gets kneecapped fresh out the gate. People have joked that, oh, don't worry, they'll make Persona 3 Reload Platinum, and then they'll add FES and Portables content, and I really hope that's not true. If you must, like, if you just can't help yourself, at least give it a couple years. Don't make people buy a whole game again. Make it like DLC or something. Though that'll be the point where they can port it onto the next Nintendo console so they can still charge this new premium price and say, hey, at least it comes with everything, so you late adopters are practically getting a steal. Whatever, you give Kotane some love and maybe I'll do another playthrough of Reload. Amusingly, I think this playthrough made me appreciate Portable more. Which is weird, right? Reload should have been that game where you go, oh, how could I ever go back to the previous versions of this game? But it's not. At least, you know, for people like me who don't have a problem with playing games that are old. That said, again, SMTF, Persona 1, heck, I'll even accept the 2 duology. You could remake one of those games next and I wouldn't complain. Yeah, I know. They're not going to. They're probably going to make Persona 4 Rerun or something instead. Well, at least it's easy to go back to these games nowadays. You know, at the beginning of this video, I mentioned replaying Portable over and over again, and even as I was scripting this video, I booted up Portable on my Switch and played a chunk of it. Reload is now that for somebody else now, and regardless of my gripes with it, I couldn't be happier about that, because in the end, when all is said and done, it's still Persona 3. The point where what once was and what will be met at the hip and passed the torch. The overall themes, atmosphere, and design of Persona 1 and the 2 duology melding with the new path the series would take, and in that sense, Persona 3 acts like a swan song to that era of the series. But if you don't have that point of view for the game, like I did back in the day, then it doesn't matter, because you still get a great game with a great cast, a fantastic soundtrack, and a good, albeit flawed at times, story that'll overall charm and stick with you for years to come. And if the best thing to come out of Persona 3 Reload is that more people get a chance to see that, then who cares if I'm disappointed by it? It's done its job. Persona 3 does show its age. Really shows its age at times. But in the end, it's still a beautiful celebration of life. A defiance in the face of nihilism and sorrow, leaving behind a beacon of hope. One that acknowledges the fear of the unknown, but leaps forward, confidently and optimistically, to take one's future in their own hands. Well, hello there. Let me just say thank you for making it to the end of this very long and jibber-jabber filled video that I cannot tell if it's even going to be enjoyable to sit through, but I guess you listening to this now will have a better idea of that than I do currently as I'm recording this. Before I talk about anything else, I need to give a big thank you to my patrons. Normally I only read off the $5 ones, but I'm going to make an exception here because it's been 3 months since I made a video. Special thanks goes to Chimera, Defilinator, DJ Zapper 128, Dr. Nira, Faye, and fortunately Michael. It means so much to me that any of you have given me any amount of your hard-earned money for any period of time, and you know what, I'll even give thanks to B17 Balder, even though they haven't been a patron in a while. It's perfectly fine, I get it, life is a lot for many different reasons, especially the amount of quality games that have been coming out. And I appreciate the time you were around all the same. It's interesting because a year ago I had brought up the idea of doing a video on Portable and had even begun scripting it. But then Reload got announced, so that kind of put a hold on things because, you know, I didn't want anything I could bring up to be invalidated by an upcoming remake. But it turns out, no, I can still make that video on Portable. This didn't replace it or anything, so it probably won't be this year, because this is probably enough P3 for 1 year, and I want to do some other things I have planned, but someday. Someday I'm going to make a video probably longer than this one about how much Persona 3 Portable means to me, and it's going to be weirdly personal, much more than how things got in the spoiler section of this video, so look forward to that in the far-off future. But, yeah, I think that's it for now. So, thank you all so much for watching. Be safe out there. I'll see you guys next time, and take care.